incorporates everything that's going to generate revenue to pay for the project. Is that a correct statement?
There's a road project that's being funded by a development project that creates a development project in a plan area that creates an increment that funds the road infrastructure project.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. I got a couple of questions. First, I want to make a statement. I don't know who said that folk in the West Side don't want to see the river or go to the river when, according to the data, that our inner city kids don't even understand or can relate or point out what a river is or a pond, and that's because we don't see it. So what better way to give them access to see it? So, and I grew up in the West Side, but I did have the opportunity to go to a river and, that kind of thing. So I think we should allow everybody else to. But in 1985, when you said this plan rolled out, the ultimate goal was to diversify Chattanooga. So why would we take out affordable housing?
I think that in looking at the the TIF and working with the developer to identify a way to make the TIF finances work, acknowledging the fact that the TIF increment, when you look at it and it's all said and done, it only provides the developer about a 47% increment, when we had originally planned for it to be providing 60. But as we began to work more closely with the county, it then came to our understanding that the county's got to retain close to 65% of its increment to fund the county debt service and to fund county schools. Whereas the city does have the ability to give up 60% of its increment. And so what we did was, once we realized that, I think the developer realized it would be very difficult to make a $4 million TIF work. And so he said, you know what, we said, well, maybe what the thing for us to do is to dial this back to $3.5 million, at which point we would have to remove the housing, the piece for the housing. And then that, of course, would then remove the obligation for him to do affordable housing. But it was just difficult under the existing increment that we had, given the fact that there's only 47% of this increment that he's going to be able to have access to because of county debt service, city debt service, and the county school obligation.
Okay, and on our website, it talks about Chattanooga Forward, and it says, in Chattanooga, we have a long history, and I'm reading it to you, forging public and private partnerships and engaging citizens to help us reach our common goals, and that we will, through citizen involvement, meaning us, you all in the audience, that you all will collaborate with them when it comes to economic development, social and cultural hub of our region. So during this process of this TIF application, did you have the opportunity to reach out to the citizens to hear what they had to say about it?
What we did was we've had an open process that has included IDB sessions, meetings with the IDB, 2 public input hearings, 2 application review committee hearings, and then the city council, of course, approved the but-for requirement back in November. And so during that entire process, we have worked and listened to the input from the community, and the input from the community has informed a lot of this process and informed a lot of the way that we have thought about this project as a whole. I know that, sometimes it's easy for people who may not necessarily agree with the form of financing that we use to assume that we haven't taken into consideration community interest, but that couldn't be further from the truth. At every step along the way, either from our application review committee, and I think the reason that the council approved or the council asked for an independent application review committee to be community members was because the council, in its wisdom back in 2015, said that there should be a definite opportunity for the community to weigh in. So we should be able to put together a review committee of community members that are selected by the council and the mayor to help to look at this process. And so they have all sort of given their input along the way. And so I think if you look at how this project has evolved from October to February, this has changed a lot because of community input.
Okay, and two more questions. So on the slide, you said that the TIF is used to redevelop areas. So outside of downtown, can the TIF be utilized in other communities such as East Chattanooga, East Dale, those impoverished communities as well?
There is certainly the potential for that, and I think that when you look at our TIF policy and when you look at the state legislation, and when you look at words from directly from the state comptroller, yes, the idea behind TIF is that communities should have wide discretion to decide how and when they use TIF, but ideally, communities should also be thinking about blighted communities. And so, yes, I think that going forward, we are certainly happy to have a conversation about the prospect of being able to deploy TIF as an economic development tool in some of our communities that face blight. And I think that's a conversation that we want to have.
All right, great. And then just one last thing, I just want to make a statement about the affordable housing in the downtown area. Is that time and time again we
Yes,
hear
ma'am.
that certain groups of people are being removed from the downtown area because they no longer can afford to live there. So for me, affordable housing, it doesn't just look like the West Side to me. We need to have something different.
Mhm.
And if affordable housing for people of color or poor people only is optional for the West Side or for Bayberry, we want to give money to those kind of developments to say this is what you're allowed to live in. This is what's affordable for you. When are we going to change that concept? Because affordable housing needs to be, we need to be able to live, say, hey, I want to pick downtown. I want to be able to live in St. Elmo. I want to be able to live in the new downtown. I want to stay next door to Mr. McCauley over in that area.
Sure.
But if we keep removing affordable housing from pieces, that's never going to happen. And we're not going to diversify Chattanooga as the plan says in 1985. So when are we going to put our thinking caps to do something different, to give individuals that we say our mission is to make sure we're removing barriers so everybody can have the opportunity to thrive, work, live, and play. And if we don't do it, it's just going to continue to look the same in the West Side.
Councilwoman, I think you're absolutely right. I think that when you sort of go back to how one of the things that we heard along the way from a lot of folks in the community who did not necessarily agree with this was that they did not approve of the affordable housing piece. And so I think there is room for us to have a conversation about the fact that there should be a diversity of affordable housing. And that's something that I think that we should also have with the community.
Any other questions, Councilman? Okay. Councilman Gilbert.
Thank you for educating us more on the history of this project. I appreciate that. It's amazing that we just got through talking in the 1:30 meeting about workforce development, and this young lady brought to us a picture of a possibility of having funds for workforce development. I appreciate that. It's good to see historical coming together when it comes to, the Bessie Smith is right across the street from us, but also the Blue Goose is where she actually was participating in years and years ago. So it's history. I love history. And it's to preserve that is great. To do something, my understanding that we put this park there for the history, but then we added, or we're going to add a street to stand Martin Luther King. That's history within itself. And I appreciate that. I'm glad you brought up the 21st century situation. One of my pet peeves, still is my pet peeve. But I understand more about what you're trying to do and trying to preserve, because I still remember in my first term, we had to cut $6 million to do the waterfront. And I questioned it then, so where we get that money from? They told me at that time, 21st century money. So I understand that some things does happen. We got to be prepared for it. I really appreciate that information. But overall, I think that we was going to build a road regardless if it was a TIF or not. We're going to build that road, and that road, according to Blight, would cost us more money. So this is the most reasonable way of doing it, stretching out the money instead of doing it all at one time. That would cost the taxpayer money anyway. So I do appreciate all the hard work and the history that you've given us. Thank you.
Councilman Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Hey, Sharita, and really to piggyback on partially what Councilman Gilbert just said. So we've discussed that our bond attorney recommended not bonding this because it's a small size, and that legal costs associated and other costs would actually make it too expensive, or I guess more expensive than what we're currently looking at. Do you know what that more expensive looks like?
I do not know.
Can we find that out just so that we have that comparison? Because it's one thing for Blythe to say, you know, it would cost more to do it ourselves, and our bond attorney said, don't, it'll cost more. But just so that we know what we're looking at, I would love to know what that cost more looks like so that we know for sure and can actually look at the numbers and see how much better a deal it is for the developer to be bonding this out than the city to actually be bonding out or using other forms to pay for this infrastructure.
I will follow up so that you get that.
Thank you. Oh, and sorry, one other question.
Absolutely.
The way that this is set up as a TIF with city and county, what would occur if the county did not approve this TIF?
The road infrastructure would not happen with
Okay,
this
so
TIF.
it does not go through. So this is one that we've got to have the whole thing in order for it to work.
We have to have the whole thing because we're only giving out a certain percentage of our
Right.
increment. For instance, if we were providing 75% of the increment or 100% of the increment, we might not need the county participation. But the way our policies are written, there's so little TIF available for projects that we have to have the county participation on it.
Thank you for the clarification.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Sharita.
Hello.
I appreciate you answering some of my questions in your presentation. You were correct in answering those, especially about the split funding in the 21st century waterfront. I want to thank Councilman Gilbert for bringing that to light as well earlier. Can we go back a few slides and look at the parcels?
Yes.
Because one of the items that I remember hearing the most about was buildings already under construction not qualifying for TIF.
That's correct.
And I would like for you to walk us through real quickly how those 4 parcels, and then clarify for me to make sure that those revenues or increments are going to pay for the construction of the extension only. If you would,
Correct.
please.
And so essentially what happens with a TIF is you identify the plan area. This is a fairly small plan area. It's also called a TIF district. This is a small TIF district. For instance, there are TIF districts that are hundreds of parcels. Memphis has one around St. Jude, hundreds of parcels. So you identify all of your parcels and you identify the floor property taxes that are currently being preserved, being paid. And so on these 4 parcels, we know what the existing property taxes are on these particular 4 parcels. And then when you define your area, any construction that happens on those parcels will raise the value of those parcels when they are reappraised because of the new additions and everything that has happened to those parcels. So that's where some of the construction has started. Now, the way a TIF works is because the increment comes from the growth in tax revenue, the growth in property taxes from those parcels, the increment is what funds the road infrastructure. And what's important is that the road infrastructure hasn't started, although in our policies, it's open. But the way we work TIFs and the way the developers work TIFs in the past is you don't start the infrastructure until your TIF's approved, because if it's not approved, you're going to do something else with that particular strip of land or that particular parcel. And so that's typically why you identify your plan area, you identify the floor property taxes, you look at the type of construction or development that's going to happen, you look at the future taxes you think will be generated, and then you take the future taxes you think will be generated, you subtract the floor, it is always paid, and then that increment is what comes back to fund the public infrastructure. So that, for instance, there are places that would use all of that TIF to build a trailhead. They would use that to build an amphitheater. They would do boat docks on the river. You know, all of those other things could be funded with the TIF increment if you provided enough of the increment to fund those kinds of things.
Thank you. So for example, in the Old Newton Chevrolet parking lot, that project is well underway.
Correct.
So in theory, what you're saying, well, in practice, what you're saying is that will be completed sooner than obviously if it was started today, and revenue will be generated quicker to start applying to the payment of the TIF loan.
Yes, but what will happen is we're basically looking at the way that the TIF will work. Once all the construction of all of the development pieces that are funding it, once all of that's completed, grouped together,
Okay.
and then all the parcels have been reappraised, that's when the TIF payments will start.
Understood. Okay. That was thank you for that clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilwoman Coonrod.
I just want to ask this slide. Thank you, Darren, for going back to this slide. But you have on here 180 mid-rise apartments. Now, I know I asked, why do we remove affordable housing? But just for clarity, because sometimes developers of different projects will use different terminology.
Correct.
So is there any language in the agreement that says that there's diversified enterprise or business enterprise or workforce housing? Are those words included in the agreement?
There's no language regarding workforce housing in the economic impact plan. It is the developer's intention to include language about working with diverse business enterprises on the contractor side in the development and financing agreement. And the development and finance agreement, of course, is a separate document. That will be the actual contract that the developer will sign with the Industrial Development Board. And so we're in the process of including language as we speak to outline the developer's willingness to make sure that diverse contractors are included in all of the construction.
Okay, and one other question, because it's going to be a mixed-use building. So do you know how many jobs are projected?
Yeah. Right now, the most current estimate is that there will be 92 jobs that are created from this entire TIF plan area. And that does not include the jobs from the one-time construction period. It is estimated that there would be over 400 construction jobs, but construction jobs are temporary. And so the 92 jobs is an estimate of how many permanent jobs will be there, throughout the 15 years.
So I just want to understand
Sure.
before I vote tonight. And because
No, we're not voting tonight.
we're not voting tonight.
This is
But
just for
I want
information.
to understand to make sure I got the correct information so I can become knowledgeable about it.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're only giving funds for the infrastructure,
Correct.
not to the,
We're not giving
Development.
funds for the mixed-use commercial building
okay,
or any of the apartments or the office or the restaurant. Only the public infrastructure.
which is the street. So
The-
are we giving any funds towards like the beautification of the?
Yes, yes.
Okay,
So that is also included.
okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Counselor, do you have any other questions? Okay, at this time, I want to take this opportunity, Sharita, Jermaine, the Citizen Committee, and all the partners involved with this, to thank you for all the hard work and time and energy you have put into this to this point. I know there's a couple more layers that we have to get through, but I think y'all have done a phenomenal job with your passion and dedication, and I want to thank you for that, helping us get to this point. Also, I want to
Thank
thank all the other players, the ATM, Helen, Franklin, although there's still some more layers, as I said, that we have to go through. The passion and dedication that y'all give to holding us accountable, asking those hard questions, and helping us get to this point is admirable, and the community is blessed to have so many dedicated, passionate people who care to make sure that we're getting it right. So once again, thank you. With that being said, we'll head to resolutions. 7A, please, Madam Clerk.
To exercise option to renew for a term of 1 year with Chattanooga Radio Control Club in substantially the form attached for the lease of approximately 6 acres and a defined fly zone for the flying of model airplanes, club meetings, and other connected activities with an address of 4246 Woodland Drive on a portion of tax parcel number 140-133.
District 4.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Summit.
Any, we good?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say, if you're having a chance to go up and see these airplanes fly, they fly helicopters and airplanes. It's a phenomenal. They have an annual event. I'll be sure to mention it when the time comes around. But it's very, very interesting to see the level of skill that's used and investment into this sport, if you will. They're also a very philanthropic organization that uses this land to actually raise money for that benefits our community. Thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, we'll move to February 20th, Resolution 7A.
A resolution authorizing the mayor on behalf of the Department of Youth and Family Development and initiated by the Department of Economic and Community Development to execute an agreement to exercise option to renew with Chattanooga Housing Authority in substantially the form attached for a term of 1 year for the use of the gymnasium at Cromwell Hills Apartments to operate programs for youth, young adults, and families on the property located at 3940 Camellia Drive on a portion of tax parcel number 137EA001.
Chair, I just want to thank the vision of the mayor for blindness for the kids up in that area. At one time, they didn't have nowhere to go for recreation, for educational parts, and the city jumped in and made a partnership so that they can provide opportunities for the people in that area. I really appreciate it for the administration. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilman Gilbert. Madam Clerk, 7B, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor on behalf of the Department of Youth and Family Development and initiated by the Department of Economic and Community Development to execute an agreement to exercise option to renew with Chattanooga Housing Authority in substantially the form attached for a term of 1 year for the use of the Sheila Jennings Wellness Center to operate programs for youth, young adults, and families on the property located at 1201 Poplar Street on a portion of tax parcel number 145FA002.
Okay. Let's go with 7C, please.
A resolution approving an economic impact plan for the Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard development area.
Madam Clerk, let's go with 7D, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Evergreen Real Estate for a TIF loan related to the extension of ML King Boulevard to the riverfront and the Blue Goose Hollow Trailhead.
No questions? Once again, I want to thank everybody for coming out this afternoon. Council, is there any other business that needs to come before us before we adjourn? Then we are adjourned till 6 o'clock. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman Gilbert, or was that an old? That was an old one. Okay. Now we are adjourned.